Julie and I actually met at a conference in Portugal a number of years ago in Porto, the International Harm Reduction Association conference, and we just sat down beside one another. We didn't know one another, and we got chatting, and it turned out that she was working in harm reduction in South Africa, and I have been a visiting professor to several South African universities, and we have common interests in terms of people who use drugs, HIV, then there was the South African common interest, so we just hit it off and have been in touch ever since. Well, Julie really was the leader. I was really there in the background. I mean, she's just fabulous. She's very close to the challenges on the ground. So the challenge really is in rural South Africa is accessing healthcare. And if you add into that a woman who uses drugs, and if you add into that mix a woman who is pregnant and uses drugs, you can imagine the challenges were enormous. So Julie, through her work and her work with these women, set about developing a toolkit to inform healthcare providers in these local areas how best to sort of approach that challenge. And that work was informed, obviously, by the women as well. I mean, I've been a researcher for many years. I first started doing HIV research back in the early 1990s, before there was any cure. That led me into doing research with people who use drugs, looking at hidden populations, looking at vulnerable populations. So my input was as an expert in terms of the research and guiding the research. Julie is, as I say, harm reduction practitioner, if you like, and consultant. So, and she's based in South Africa, so she would have the on-the-ground knowledge and very close to the field. And then I would be bringing the sort of the international expertise. I mean, I've also consulted with the United Nations World Drug Report, which looks at drug use all over the world, like on each continent. And I've been on the scientific committee of the European Drugs Agency, and I've been on that committee for 10 years. So I get to hear the global challenges. I get to learn from global experience. So I was able to bring my research experience matched with Julie's local and consultant experience to produce the toolkit. So it was great to see the breadth of stakeholders, actually. Obviously, there were local healthcare providers from these rural areas, but the women, and I mean, I have a picture here if I could show you, you know, these are some of the women who use substances, and we're happy to have their photograph taken, and that's Julie's photograph as well. So the women who were attending the services. So it was very much informed, you know, by women who use drugs, who are expecting babies, living in rural South Africa, and the healthcare providers. So if you take, say, some of the nurses maybe, so a lot of the time the nurses would maybe train in the city at the university, but then quite often they're sent to the community health centres way out in the rural areas. So they're very young, you know, early in their career. So toolkits, professional toolkits for these healthcare professionals are really, really important. So it was informed by those stakeholders, and obviously then the local policy makers and the regional funders. Oh, it's just lovely. I mean, I'm just looking at the photograph there of the group that were actually involved during the project. 3 of them had their babies, and those babies were delivered safely and well, and mothers were well too. But there was over 200 people, mothers, women impacted, so they would have received non-stigmatizing care. They may be perhaps referred to HIV services if that's what they needed, ongoing, you know, prenatal and postnatal care. So there was over 200 women actually reached, and through this toolkit was, you know, used with those 200 women. Really, really important, you know, in terms of human rights-based approach to care, non-stigmatizing language, and, you know, the appropriate care being given for the need, be that HIV, be it pregnancy, be it postnatal depression. It could have been domestic violence or so forth, because all of those would be experienced or could be experienced, as in any country. But the point is that they receive the appropriate care, and that the healthcare practitioner is supported as well as the mothers. A global impact can be local as well. I work very close with services. I mean, I've trained in, you know, mathematics, which is way up here, but actually it's bringing the way up here to way down here. It's that two-way communication. So a lot of my work and the research questions that I address are actually informed by the challenges on the ground. So actually, look, I have my 2 books there. This book is on the debates, like, you know, why do we need decriminalisation, or do we need people to be penalised? Looking at those debates that are very much on the ground. And the second book, this one here, was actually informed by global challenges. How do I do a needs assessment? How do I do a systematic review? How do I evaluate a program? How do I bring in trauma-informed services? So this book addresses that. And also my work, where I have a MOOC, a massive open online course developed on addiction nursing. You know, what are the principles of addiction nursing? How do I do a brief intervention? And we're developing another MOOC again as a result of the work on the ground and creating impact on people who use drugs and have neurodiversity. And that came directly both from students and from practitioners. And my team here in Trinity have been able to gather the international and the local evidence to create something that's going to make a difference. And that's already, word about that or information about that has actually been sought already by the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Drugs, have brought us in to talk about that piece of work. So it's really important to me that the work is informed by the challenges on the ground and brings the solutions back to both the challenges on the ground, policy and practice. That's what drives me.